Okay, hello everyone. So my name is Karl Heinz Marbaise, as already mentioned. I'm the Apache Maven chairman of the project at the moment. I will show you different things about what the Maven project at the moment is working on and what state we are at the moment. That's very important, I think, to know what the current development is and what the news are and what the new features are, which are we working on. Let us start with some things here about maybe few things about me, but it's not very interesting. The most important thing is some kind of agenda here. We will talk about a bit of the ecosystem of the Maven ecosystem because it's very large in the end. Some of the architectures. Then we will talk about some parts on particular so-called consumer build POM, the reactor enhancement, the timeline, and the JDK requirements, which are very important, I think, to know what runtime requirements are and what you can do with the different JDKs. And I will talk in detail with some other particular features and show them in real life here. I do about 15 minutes, hopefully, and the rest will be shown in the IDE on command line. So what we have here on the left upper side is the so-called Maven core. And that is usually that what you download and call via MVN on the command line. Based on that, we have some core ITs. That means the integration test we are using, and also the artifact resolver, which is responsible for downloading all the dependencies and things like that. On the right side, on the upper corner, you see the Maven plugins. We have at the moment at the Apache Software Foundation about 50 plugins at the moment, which are all maintained based on 4 of the Maven team here. We have also the parent POMs here, which are also maintained for the Apache Software Foundation, which are usually consumed by the Apache Software Project. Some of them do that, others don't. We have also some other parts here, like the compiler plugin, as maybe mentioned already, the different plugins, compiler, resource, install, and things like that. I just bet that you already use them. There are other things like assembly plugin, enforcer, and things like that. The parent POMs I already mentioned there. Most important things is the so-called shared components, which are an extracting of to prevent code duplication in the different plugins, because we have many plugins which do some kind of packaging, war, jar, things like that. So we have a component which is called Maven Archiver, which do handle many of the common stuff, so we don't need to reproduce that every time. So we have the area, it's called Doxia. This is for site rendering. That means we can create a site of that. If you take a look on the Maven side, this is also rendered with Maven itself. So you can create that for different documentation from Markdown, things like that, old stuff, APT, which we are using at the moment in several times. You can also get support for ASCII Doctor via the external ASCII Doctor Maven plugin, which is not maintained by us here. We have also some kind of skins. That means how the site looks like. We have different ones. You can select them. We have some archetypes which are maintained to make an easy template setup for the projects possible. We have integrated that resolver later on about 4 or 5 years ago. Sorry, 8. That was before it was Eclipse Ether, and it was hard to maintain. So we integrated that into the Apache Software Foundation. That took a lot of time here. So the next things are things like the Plexus parts or Plexus components from the CodeHouse Plexus part. If you take a look in your installation of your Maven, there is a part which is called Plexus Classword and things like that. We have some different mix up there. In the meantime, we have, for example, in the earlier versions in pre-Maven 4, we use Plexus Modello. That was the part which is generating the code to reading the POM file and generating the XSD file and all this stuff which is related to the XML processing, things like that. That had changed a lot in the meantime. We also use that and changed a lot of things. We have also Plexus interpolation, which is responsible to interpolate properties like in the POM file, for example, these project.version, project.artifact ID or something like that. That was responsible for that, which is not inside the Apache Software Foundation here. We have also the part which are so-called the Mojo House plugins, and I bet you also use many of them. For example, things like the versions Maven plugin, Accept plugin, Flatten, App Assembler, and things like that. Then we take a look back into the history. You see that the date 2005, that was Maven 2. And you see on the left side these parts, reporting API and all that stuff. That meant at that time, the reporting site generation and things like that was integrated into the core and not externalized to plugins, which is the state of today or for a long time. We have several other parts like classwords on the right side. We have so-called backend provider on the bottom side here, which is marked yellow, things like that. Interpolation on the right side, you see that. This called Plexus container, that was a dependency injection framework, or IOC to be more accurate here, which has been replaced over the time and keep compatible with other things like that. In 2010, we started with Maven 3. And you see already several things has been changed. In particular, the bottom side, there is the Plexus, Bean, and Juice patches, this part here. And there was a compatibility layer between the old Plexus part and the new Juice layer, which was really required to handle things like that. And to make it possible to run a new Maven 3 plugin, which is run on Maven 3, an old Maven 2 plugin. There was a time to migrate that. That was a long time, and that works already today. And there are some problems today. We have extracted the complete reporting part on the left side, which has been moved to plugins, completely like Maven side plugin, all that stuff. And the Plexus part on the right side has been kept there. We have also the wagon provider part, which had been sometimes where the transport layer has been done by wagon, and that has changed a lot over the time. And then we have Maven 3.5, and then you see some changes. We have a logging API, SLF4J API on the left side. We have added JUnit or something like that. Yeah, we could do colors on the command line, on the console, things like that. And you see also the Plexus inject and juice on the bottom. That made possible to have really just at inject versions working, JavaX inject, that you can do that with these defaults like that. And that was not specialized to annotations which are handled by Maven itself. There are defaults like that. And we extracted things like the resolver provider here on the SPI implementation, things like that, for the resolving of the artifacts had been changed over the time. And now we are in Maven 4. In the meantime, the development has taken a long time because it's a lot of stuff to change here. We have changed also the providers for the logging. On the right side, the backend provider is still there, but you shouldn't use them, and remove that already in Maven 3.9. It had been changed. I will do more details later. We have some changes on the model here. We have a tool chain builder, things like that. We have builder support, model builder, model transformation, and things like that has been changed for a lot of things, because that foundation work has been required to make an evolving of Maven itself possible. So let us take about particular issues or particular features of the Maven 4 version, because we needed to go forward and we need to change something. The problem with that is that the usual Maven POMs had been started with Maven 3 already, or more accurate, already with Maven 1, but there was a model version. In all POMs, you see that model version 4.00, something like that. And if you don't do that, your build will crash and will not accept that. The problem with that is that there are some issues with that. The problem is that you declare several parts in the POM file, like dependencies, dependency plugin management, things like that, profiles, repositories, distribution management, and many other things. So the point is we have two functionalities of the POM. That means one is the information about how to build the project or describe how it should be built based on the declarative description of that. That's the first focus on that. And the second one is the description of the dependency graph, or in general, a little bit more simpler to say, which kind of dependencies does your project have? And as you already know, maybe from Java development or any other language, this is a kind of a separation of concern problem, because we have two functionalities here in the POM, but we deserve two things here, and that is a problem in the end. It is often not a big issue, but for doing some different things, it can be problematic, in particular for our purposes at the moment. So we have also the point here, which is very important, that the POM files in version 4, if I mean version 4, I mean model version 4.00. I'm not talking about the Maven version itself. I'm talking about the model version here at the moment. The problem is that the POM file is consumed by so many tools, build tools, Maven, Gradle, Apache, IDEs, for example, IntelliJ, Eclipse, NetBeans, all these tools are consuming them and using them. That is, on the one side, a very good thing because it brings you support for your handling in your IDE and improves your productivity and things like that. But on the other hand, it is a problem to change that format. So we needed to change that because we need to separate these two concerns here. We need to focus and say we have something which is describing the building part, so how it is built, which plugins had to be configured, how they had to be executed, which and when and version and all that stuff, repositories use and all that stuff. And on the other hand, we should describe only what we need to consume, a library or a tool which can be published, has been published on Central or something like that, or in an internal repository manager. And if you do that, you can't do that very easily because many people already suggested, why don't you simply change the POM file? The problem is because it's consumed by so many things, people and tools, of course. And if you do that, it will break things. And that's the big issue here. Not only the tools are the problem, also if you think about the central repository, it contains millions of artifacts. And if that will be changed, then you have a big issue, or I would say not big, it's gigantic in the end. And the result would be that it will not be accepted. So if we change simply the POM which existing at the moment, that will result in not accepting the change here. In the history of Maven, there had been already such a change between Maven 1 and Maven 2. There were a time where two formats existed, Maven 1 format and Maven 2 format. And the experience was, to say it very kindly, not very good. So we already had that experience. So we said, that's not the way to go. So we needed to find a different way, or the result would be something like that. So we have to decide it, and long time discussed about what we can do. We need to define the so-called build POM, which is at the beginning in version 4.00 at the moment, and will produce as a result a version 4 which is put into central repository, like Central or something like that. What we can do is also to produce some additional info, project dependencies, to resolve also already the complete dependency tree and make it easier for downloading bulk downloads and things like that, which is at the moment not the case. We are not at that level, and maybe I'm not sure if we really reach that level, but that's the idea behind the thing. So we have to separate these things. One is called build POM and one is the consumer POM. The consumer POM is published. So now we can change the build POM in a way we would like to do that and change things which might be better required or whatever. So we have to separate the information, like only the dependencies will be the consumer POM, and all the other stuff like properties, builds, modules, parent, things like that will be completely removed of that. So let us go into a real demo and think about how the changes are and what we are doing here at the moment. I have a simple POM file here. I will show you that. I think the best way is to show that in the IDE. I have used here a very, very basic POM at the beginning to show you some of the features already Maven 4 already has here. We start with a very simple thing here. I have only defined the so-called coordinates, group ID, artifact ID, and version, and I will just simply build that. The first thing I will do and check which version I'm using here. I'm using 4.00 alpha 12. That's the last one. We are preparing at the moment alpha 13 in the time, so I can just build that POM. So you see some interesting hints here. The warning at which is marked yellow here. So it tells you version not locked for default plugins. That means the plugins we are using here, for example, Clean plugin and other plugins as well, are not defined by the plugin management. And that is really a required thing to do that you can get a reproducible build all the time, because if you don't use the same plugin, it could happen that a different version of a plugin maybe has a bug, or an update between different plugins caused a different configuration, something like that. So I can do that in a more other way. And so you see that the warning has changed, that there are many other plugins mentioned. So that shows already, based on the life cycle, you have to add the different plugins, for example, compiler plugin, Surefire, jar plugin, things like that. It uses at the moment particular versions, but it can happen that it changes over the time. That's one of the warnings you get at the moment with Maven 4 already, that it will give you some hints into the right direction. So let us take a look into a different thing and different features which are already available with Maven 4. So I have prepared a different project, which is called, I call it Java EE. That is not particularly related to Java EE. It's only to show that. Just have a second. That should be the one. This project is just simply as an example for a multi-module build. It just contains things like a parent, several modules in that, like this here. I show you here some different setups. Sorry, I'm just on the wrong branch here. Sorry for that. I just changed that. Sorry for that. So I have a usual parent. What you see here is very important, the model version. As you see here, the model version. I'm using my own parent here to define all the plugins which I use. So I pinned them all of that. Then I defined a group, artifact ID, and a version. Nothing fancy here. Very usual thing here. We have also a thing like modules here, a list of modules. That means the submodules here. Can take a look into one of the modules. For example, I take the look here at the service module. I have defined a parent that makes the relationship to the parent automatically, and that defines a so-called multi-module build. You see also I have defined the version number here. I use here a placeholder, which I talked about, interpolation thing, which is exactly responsible for that point. So let us build this project with Maven 4 already. So I just do a clean at the beginning, just to start here. You see that all the modules are executed based on the order, on the dependency defined order. That means one module has a dependency to another, and that defines the build order here. So not a big issue here. I can simply call an MVN verify and run the whole build, and it will completely run the complete build and finish that. Okay, that's the first hint is, so the usual way, if you use that, you can simply start building with Maven 4 Alpha already existing projects. So that works already. Very important thing, I think, to make a migration more easily than just via a big bang or something like that. So what I can now do is to say, I would like to use a different version for all that, but I don't want to define that into literally in my POM file all the time here, because I wanted to use a different version for my project. So I'm just lazy. I don't want to do that. And many people complain about that. And they are completely right. They are complete about that. And there are already some solutions with that are already working. If you use a so-called CI friendly with Maven 3, there was a solution which already worked, but there are some issues with that, not perfectly fine. And we have started to do work on that. And in the meantime, this works completely. Let us take a look. I would change the branch. I already prepared that because I'm lazy, because I don't want to make that on live here. What I have done is to use a revision property which defines inside the version tag here. So I'm able to define the version I would like to use via this property. I have changed that in all these modules. Let us take a look into the others I have shown before. So what I've done is also I defined the tag here and used that property here. So to make it more easier, so I don't need to change that all the time and things like that. So what I can do now here is, first I can build that completely, but you see a problem because I have not defined the revision as a version or with the value here. It doesn't work here. So what we can do is just define the revision here, 2.5, something like that, whatever. And now I can build the whole project. That works also if I would like to do that with a verify or with an install or whatever. So the problem here is I need to define that revision property all the time on the command line. And that's a bit clumsy, and you don't like it. I don't like it either here. So the point is, how can we handle that we make it more easier to use? So the simple thing is we can just simply define that property in a very simple way. So I can just revision 1.4.5 something. I just define that inside my property, inside my POM, sorry. So now I can just simply call clean here, and now it works. So there is a defined value for the property, and now I can build the whole project without supplemental configuration options, which are not required anymore to give them on the command line. So that makes it easier for me to use that here. The point here is very important. On the first glance, it might look, so where's the problem? It just works. Yeah, that works. Yeah, but a very important thing is I don't use the flatten Maven plugin, which is required in Maven 3 to use the CI friendly. So the first big thing here is that we have changed Maven core in that way that it supports completely this thing out of the box. So you don't need to define or call the flatten Maven plugin in any way. So that works just out of the box in the meantime. So that's one of the steps in make it more easier to handle something like the versions and things like that. So yeah, that works. And okay, so far. But let us just build with a verifier, something like that, and see we have created all the versions here. And you can see also here the assembly plugin, app assembler, things like that had been created. And also these archives have been built with the right version number from the property. But now the important part is what happens if I need to build a different version? I don't want to build the version 1.4.5. I would like to build 7.6.4 or something like that. So the easy part is now I can do that very simply and define the revision property on the command line and rebuild just by defining the revision property here. And that's one of the most important things now, that you can handle that out of the box with Maven Core without supplemental plugins or any supplemental configuration here. So you can simply change that by defining that on the command line without a supplemental problem, without any plugins. So that is one of the important things and the foundational steps we had done here to make this possible, which in the end makes other things possible too. So let me take a look, and let us take a look how we can change other things and what we can do also. That was one step, but we can go a little bit further. If you think about this structure in a multi-module build, you already may know that the parent definition in a module, I'm here in the service module here, in this one here. So that means if I reference here this parent, that means automatically it goes one level higher and reads that POM file here in technical. There is a definition that can be used, so-called relative path, and I can use that manually, but usually you don't need to do that because that's the default. One of the things about conventions over configuration. So if you don't use it, if you haven't changed the structure, you shouldn't do that. So you can just simply omit the tag here. But if you think about that, why do I need to define that version at all? It doesn't make sense because it's always the same. And in the previous example, you see in all that the same entry has been done all the time. So let us take a look into the next step and go to another step here. So what we can do now is, First, we have just defined the revision as before. We defined the revision property in the root POM here. But then we have decided to make things a little bit easier. So what you see now is, first, you see the parent is underlined here in red by IntelliJ correctly here, because we are using the model version 4. And we have simply omitted the version tag here completely. I just removed that. So you can do that and it will work here. So if I do that, so I can just, I don't need to define that because the POM already has a definition for the revision property. So I can completely run that build and it works out of the box without defining the parent tag. I have to say here clearly, this at the moment is a kind of a discussion if we should do that in the model version 4, if we should keep that, because that would be breaking something here if someone is consuming that build POM or this POM here at the moment with a Maven version 3, because that will break completely because it doesn't understand that completely. So we are at the moment thinking, should we move that to model version 4.1, something like that? I think that will be the final result, but at the moment it is not. So it's not very accurate here or not 100% correct. So please don't bother that and don't be bothered by that, and just check that, and maybe the next update will changing that. So another thing here is, if you think about that, take a look into the domain here. As you see here, also the version tag is completely omitted here. Another thing, if you think a bit more about the structure, we have always a root and a child relationship, or in many levels that's more or less the same here. We can do things like that and think a bit of things like, why do I need to define a version for a dependency? Maybe you have not taken a look into detail in the previous example, but usually you write something like that here and say project.version or something like that. That's the usual way you do that here. But if you think about that, you can simply omit it, because based on the group ID and the artifact ID, Maven itself can identify, is it part of the current reactor? If yes, then we don't need a version here at all, and can automatically calculate that version or know that version from that, and just simply omit that. What I can see is that several people are defining the versions of the modules in the parent POM via dependency management, just defining all the modules there. That will also solve that problem in a way. But the point is, if you do that manually and you add a new module to that, you have to maintain also the dependency management part and add this module as well. So with this setup, you don't need to do that. You can completely omit that and automatically get that point. I just go back to the previous branch to show you this first step and how it looks like. And if you see that here, it was defined with the project version as I showed you before. And I have no dependency management for my modules in my my build here. So that makes it a bit easier here to handle that. And there are things like that, so you can use that and make it easier for you to handle these version things, which I think it's a very good thing. It's only the first step or the foundation work at the moment, so it's the starting point here. So let us take a look how these resulting files also look like, because if you see, as IntelliJ is already complaining here correctly, and as I mentioned before, if I would like to use that, that could be a problem. So the question is, if I would do an install or a deploy to a repository manager, how does those files look like? So I will test that by just doing an install here. So it will be installing them into my local repository, and then we will take a look into these as an example of one of these files, for example. So I can do just by using here a simple file. Let us take a look. There was a service file, if I correctly remember. So this one. So there are, let me say, two things in there. Sorry for that. Hold on a second. So there are installed in the meantime two files, or 2 POM files, to be more accurate here. There is installed a thing like, which is POM, just called by POM. It does not contain any classifier. This is a so-called classifier. It is automatically generated and put there as well. You may seen that with the sources plugin or the Javadoc plugin, that this thing had been already there. So if we take a look into that here, I will show you the contents of that. You will see several things here, or more important things which are very important here. You see, first, the version has been automatically replaced. That means the version which had been defined by a property before up is now put into that resulting POM file here, and now you can use that. Another very important thing is that this POM file does not contain any parent anymore. There is no parent anymore. If you think about the original file I used here, let us go back into my IDE here. If you take a look here and take a look here, there was a reference to that parent, but that has been completely omitted here, and it has been replaced with some particular info. If you see something like that, the description, inception, organization, and all that stuff had been replaced and put in there, which is coming from the parent here. So this POM is now consumable by anyone without accessing the parent, which is sometimes a thing which works, yes, of course, no problem, but that produces another walk through the download and identifying process. And if you have a large hierarchy of different POM files, it could take some time in the end. It also resolves the dependencies, things like that. And I have to say here at the moment, these dependency management part have been resolved. But to be honest, at the moment, it is not perfectly. I'm not sure if that's the final result here, but you see already the dependencies have been already resulted and flattened here, in particular things like from the JUnit Jupiter platform and things like that. And to be honest, at the moment, I doubt that that is the final result, because I'm not sure if that's really correct. We need to discuss that and maybe find some issues or maybe change that. But you see also these dependencies, and maybe we need to talk about things like test dependencies. Should they be part of that, or should they filtered out or something like that? I'm not sure at the moment. We need to discuss that in detail. That was the first one. And the other one is the so-called build POM. It's more or less exactly, or to be honest, exactly the same POM as you already used here up front. So that was the original POM, as I showed you, you have typed in your IDE. The most important thing here is, and which you should understand, this is in the end, like this one here, is not a consumable POM for any Maven version. It will not work because the version tag is missing here, and that is a big issue here. That it's only put there to give you an information, if you like to know that, how that project has been built here. And that's very important here to know on that side. So that's very important to understand that we are separating them, and that the build POM is really only the POM at the state how you used it to build your project. So it is not consumable. If you use things like remove the tag and using the version properties and things like that, that is changed, and that will result maybe in not consumable POMs or build POMs, to be more accurate here. The other POM is consumable and works for Maven 3 as Maven 4 and other tools. If you find some issues here, please report them. That is one of the things we have changed all the time in the meantime, but there are also other things we have changed. For example, we have a thing which is reactor improvements. So usually you have a large multi-module build. This is just an example of a small one. If you have maybe hundreds or even thousands of modules, which are existing in the reality, you don't want to build that all of them. There are some other opportunities to reduce the build time via Maven extension, things like that, cache extension or something like that. It is also possible to build only parts of that. In the old times, in Maven 3, you might have realized if you want to build only parts of that, that doesn't work. Only if you do an upfront requirement to do an install completely before upfront. But Maven 4 has changed, and there are a lot of improvements. So I can just use or build here some parts without doing supplemental issues here, just building this single module in just one call without supplemental configuration or a required install. Yes, I have done the install before, but that was not required. I can completely wipe out the contents of that repository, and it will even work. So you can do that without supplemental configuration. The only thing as a requirement is that you have to build your project at once, maybe via verify, for example, to have all the things set up correctly. And after that, you can use -pl -project and separate and give things like that. That has been improved a lot on that. So next thing is we have integrated or created a so-called BOM packaging. So now we are coming to a very new feature here, and I need to change the project here, so-called BOM example. I have to change to my IDE. Hopefully I have the right one. So you already might see some issues here. Very important thing here is based on that. I go to the root POM here. Just close that up here. So the most important thing here is what you see is model version 4.1.0 has been changed. It has also changed the XML namespace, and the XSD definition has been changed also. One thing is we use the revision property as before. There's no big difference here, but there are other differences. So let us take a look. I have only a small multi-module build with 2 supplemental modules and one which is a so-called BOM. I will take into the different modules here. Module 1, for example, that has the parent as before. I have changed, of course, the model version to all of them that this is working, because the BOM packaging only works with model version 4.1. I have some dependencies here. Very simple project. It's very, very easy and simple. We have another module, maybe module 2, same thing here, all that stuff as before. And now we have a so-called BOM package, which is a very important thing here, that we have also these 4.1, and a very thing is the packaging is now BOM. That means bill of material. A so-called BOM is used for that if someone else wants to consume your library, which contains several modules. For example, if you take a look into Mockito, or if you took into SJ, or maybe in Spring Boot, they do the same thing here. You have many modules which should be defined via a dependency management. And if you import that in your own project, you don't have to import several separate artifacts of that. For example, without a BOM, you have to consume that by importing the dependency or defining the dependency mod 1 and mod 2. If you think about mod 1 to 10 or something like that, you have to do manually that one from mod 1 to up to mod 10. So it's a bit clumsy and not very, very healthy and very easy to use. So the idea is to use that BOM here is just to import that into your dependency management. And then all these dependencies, or these dependencies of this BOM, will automatically be included in your project. So automatically with their versions. So it makes handling for a consumer or a user of your libraries or several modules much more easier. So this is a support that will work out of the box. At the moment, you can do that as well with some more complex setups. With Maven, it is possible too, but there are some problems in there which are not very good. They can be improved, and that's exactly what we did that to improve that handling in a much more better way here. Let us take a look into that project. I'm just using that. Just do a simple build here. That's not very, very fancy here. I do an install, which is the very important thing here. It builds as usual with the versions and so on. I can change the version numbers and so on, as I've shown before. What I can do now is to take a look into this example here. Let's take a look. We have here some example. Just hold on a second. I have this module, which is called BOM. And now I have a POM generated from that. As you see, we'll take a look first in the build POM, and you see that the module version is 4.1, the packaging is BOM, which will not work with Maven 3. So if you try to build that with Maven 3, it will not work simply. That's one of the breaking changes because we are making a major version change. So now let us take a look into the result of that. And that is this POM here without the dash build. And then you see a very interesting thing now. The version has been changed. There is no parent reference anymore. And you see only these two dependencies in that. So now we have created a consumable build POM, which is an artifact which can be consumed by Maven 3, by Gradle, by whatever you are using, which can work with Maven files or particular with POM files. So that makes it much more easier for library maintainers and things like that to handle that in a more easier way than before with a complicated setup with Maven assembly that works, but it's not very easy to set up. So it's a bit clumsy in some ways. So it is much more easier to do that with that way here. So we have here that, and that works out of box in the meantime. So these are some of the features. I would like to go back to my slides here because I have some other supplemental information about that. So we had to make the separation possible between Maven POM version 4, model version 4, that they are separated. Maven 4 must be able to read that and build with that, as you see as the first project that works with Maven 3 as Maven 4. And the core, the resulting Maven core, must be able to produce this Maven 4 also. And now we can take a look on the timeline we had with the different Maven versions here. In the Maven 3.9 line, you might have already realized several aspects of change in. We have moved away from this wagon transport, and we call it native HTTP. We have just removed that. If you have a build where is something called a thing like extension, or wagon extension loaded, you should get rid of that because that has been changed and so on. We have some plugin API changes that had been issued with some plugins or very old plugins. We are working on some new versions of the plugins, Maven 4 plugins only, and that might be required them to change there. We had several problems found which has been injected, very old versions, really ancient version of Plexus utils, and that could break some of these plugins with Maven 3.9 already. There are breaking something. Luckily, there are not many issues of that, but we have found ancient old plugin version, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, something like that. We have some implementation enforcement and improvements here. We have created the MVN directory. That's a requirement. You might have seen the warning or the information at the first line of the build. And we have introduced new properties, which are session top directory and root directory, which identified the root location of your .mvn directory. You already can use that for a longer time for Maven config, JVM config, and things like that. But now it has really a real other person to find this information. So you can use something like officially supported session root directory, session top directory that can be used for some particular plugin configuration, or if you have some special requirements to find the root location of your whole reactor build or something like that. The first alpha releases of Maven 4 have been out there since June last year. There were already some changes already. You've seen some of them. There are some root location identification, some other things like that. A lot of reactor improvements have been done, as I've shown only a few of them. There is a complete talk of Martin Mulders have been on YouTube on a conference talking about these in particular. We have internally a bunch of changes. We have switched to Woodstock and things like that. We haven't introduced a model version 4.1, as I've shown before. You can define the root of that either via the .mvn directory or in the root in the POM itself. It's possible. I would say it is better to use the mvn directory, so you can use a Maven config file or something like that if you need that. So We had already this BOM packaging, as I've shown you. We can load extension in the meantime from the M2E. It is also possible, we have already a prototype that you can formulate your build POM in a complete different way if you really like to. To be honest, I don't like it, but it is possible to do that. And it makes for us possible to change things like that and make changes over the time possible, which was not possible with the old POM model and was completely blocking that point. It is technically possible to write your POM in YAML if you like to. I don't, but that's a different story. You can do that technically. And we are improving that over the time, these build POM setups, and to improve that and make more options possible. There are some orderings possible in the meantime based on if there are some plugins bound to the same phase here, as things like that. You can define a priority, but only with model 4.1. So you can make a different setup so the execution can be ordered. There are some cases where it's required. Usually it's not, but sometimes it's really required. So it's possible now. Configuration extension, we have a basic support for configuration for extensions, which was not possible in Maven 3. We have exclusion support for important BOMs that you can do also and exclude in imported BOMs, things like that. That was not possible before. We have some problems and solved a lot of fixes here, broken Javadoc jar and things like that. We have updated several times, collecting filters and resolving project outside the reactor. There was a problem that it's identified outside. That was not good. And now we come to a very important point. The Maven 3 line, 3.8 line, was a minimum requirement of JDK 7. 3.9 was JDK 8. Up to 4.alpha 12, it was also runtime JDK 8. Build time for building Maven itself, it was JDK 11. But there is a very important thing. Last week, the vote has gone done. The next alpha release will at minimum require JDK 17 to run your builds with. And the build time requirements is a different thing. That means if you want to use the next alpha version, you have to use JDK 7 at minimum. That doesn't influence what you want to create class files for. There is a -- release option or Maven compiler release option where you can define the resulting class file format which is supported. If that isn't fit enough, there is a two-chain support, so you can use a different JDK for building and running your test and running your Maven build itself. So that was a very big step here and a very important step to change that over the time. We have also, in the meantime, these Maven cache extension, which is supporting improving a lot the build times, in particular of large multi-module builds that can be used based on the configuration that you can use then in your CI/CD pipeline, like in Jenkins or whatever, GitHub or something like that. And if you configure that, that will increase POMs a lot. So I think we are at the point, based on the time, I'm completely open for question if there are. I see there are a lot of comments I've seen here on the right side here.
Yes, there have been conversations ongoing. In fact, you just answered some of the earlier questions from Simon and Kumaresh, which was what will be the Java version for Apache Maven 4? So we just learned it will be Java 17. So people are very enthusiastic about that in the chat. We do have a few questions, but let me also first share that Tony, I'm assuming, said thank you for the presentation. It was useful.
Hopefully. Thank you very much for attending that. Thank you.
And to go on to the questions, Siva is asking, does Maven 4 support different folders for unit tests and integration tests out of the box? This is a common requirement in many projects and currently achieved by using a combination of hacks.
To be honest, no, we haven't changed these configuration over conventions because we follow these conventions. You can make a difference by just using the usual naming conventions like * uppercase IT for the integration test and for the unit test * test or something like that, based on the naming convention which is defined by the Surefire plugin and Failsafe plugin. You can define that, the naming convention, but not different folders. We don't support that at the moment. And I'm not sure if we will do, because I've seen that a lot of them, but there are things like that. Maybe we do, but I don't think at the moment.
Okay, thanks. And let me see. Someone is asking, Yilmaz is asking, can we not have a Maven wrapper by default so that no Maven installation would be needed?
There is already a Maven wrapper already available since 2 years or so. You can download from Maven Apache org, and there is already the Maven wrapper available for a long time, which because we have integrated that and taken over the maintaining for the Maven wrapper. We use and it is completely supported in the meantime.
Cool. So another question is there a plan to use JSON or YAML because not everybody likes to use XML anymore?
As I said, technically, you can, in the meantime, produce your own implementation if you like, but the usual format will be kept XML for a lot of reasons, because JSON has no comments, no definition. It's the same for YAML. And with all these problems with YAML files, the indentation level and things like that, XML is much more easier and more consumable. Yes, we can discuss a lot because all the tools are supporting that, and if we would like to change that, all the tools must follow that. Like, for example, IntelliJ should be following. And to be honest, I have my doubts that it will be happen that way. So that's the basic idea we had in mind based on that.
Yeah, I agree with your comment about XML being more readable than YAML, for example. So let me see more questions. Cedric is asking, are there plans to separate API and implementation scopes that are both mixed into compile right now in order to reduce accidental transitive dependency leakage? That's a mouthful.
Yeah, I understand the question. Thank you, Cedric. At the moment, there are no plans, but it could be made open for that. And now we have the opportunity to do that at the moment. We have no plans, to be honest. At the moment, I have not all the issues, the issue tracker of these 1,000 issues in my mind, but at the moment, I don't think so. But it might be a good way to suggest that simply.
Right. So your suggestion to Cedric is to go to the issue tracker and either see if there's an issue open already or create an issue for this.
Yeah, please. Anyone else who is seeing a problem with Maven 4 at the moment, or any other problem with Maven in general, just open an issue tracker. I know it's a bit taken a bit of time because we have there is no open automatically registration. You have to wait a time, but if you go that or discuss on the mailing list or things like that, yeah, old style, medium, I know, but that helps a lot to understand what people need and what the requirements are. So we can make a plan and think if we can realize that and think about in the team about that.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. One more question. Do we still follow the same steps like before, resolving .m2 cache data by deleting, or is there a new or additional steps for updated Maven versions?
To be honest, the relationship to .m2 cache, I don't understand related to the Maven version, because you can use simply a different Maven version. Your local cache .m2 and your home directory will be reused. It's only depending on the versions you are using as dependencies or plugins and something like that. That is unrelated usually. Maybe I misunderstand the question here, and maybe you can give a more detailed expression. Maybe you can contact me via Twitter, Mastodon, or something like that, and give me the question more in detail so we can discuss what you're really meaning.
Yes, I'm not sure what the question means, but I know that occasionally I need to clear my M2 folder just to make sure that everything builds again. It's one of those, have you tried turning it off and on again?
Then I say clearly, then you have a problem in your build. That is not the cause of the cache. Definitely.
Surely.
I'm not cleaning up my cache for about 5 years in the meantime, so I never cleaned up my cache any time. I have no problems. I know some people have, but that point I have identified that there was a problem in their build, in their own build. There was some dependencies wrong and things like that.
Yeah. Okay, someone else is asking about TOML. It supports comments.
Yeah, I know, but in the end, we have already XML, and The problem is we have a thing like XML, which is supported by so many plugins, and it's produced and used by many plugins and tools. And the other thing, if you think about Maven Central, there are millions of POM files in there. Who is willing to do the work and migrate them all? To be honest, yeah, we are not a source project. We are not paid at the moment for that. So
Yes.
whoever will do that, and that's the problem, I think. And the tool creators like IntelliJ or any other are not willing to follow that path, I think, because that's much effort to do that and get the same integration level as you already have with the XML files and things like that.
Yes, and you explained earlier in your talk how, you know, Maven is part in a much larger tool chain.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Any changes that you make will impact other tools that depend on it. And it sounds like...
And we are talking about millions of impacts, because not only the tools, also the builders. And if we change that, that means for Maven 4, it is not usable by Maven 3 anymore. Yes, that point is already there with model version 4.1. But for the tooling support, it's a bit harsh, I think. So the acceptance level, I think, would be very low, to be honest.
Yes, and it sounds like you're being very mindful of what are breaking changes and being very explicit about it.
To be honest, hopefully we are. I think that's a problem, because we have so many users. We have 2.5 billion downloads per year of the artifacts from Maven Central only, and not to count the many downloads from your internal repository managers, Artifactory, Nexus, or something like that. Not that counted, only Maven Central. So that's a big user community and consumer community. And I think that's not a good idea to just say them or breaking up them. That's not a good idea for an open source project, I think.
Yep.
I understand the point with XML, but on the other hand, I say you have a good support in IntelliJ and other IDEs to complete your things in XML. You usually don't write them by hand completely. Yes.
Yep. And people are saying in the comments it is easy to read. So
yes.
Awesome.
It's a bit bloating, I know that, but it's extremely easy to understand from my point of view. Yes,
exactly.
Sorry.
Personally, no, sorry. We're both trying to speak, and also we're running out of time. Personally, I don't mind something being a bit more verbose if it's easier to read and understand. So anyway, we are out of time for this session. Yes. So thank you again so much for joining us and sharing all of your knowledge with us. People really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I have more to learn about Maven. So we all have some homework. Thank you so much for joining us, Karl Heinz.
Yeah, thank you for the intention. If something is not working, please report that. It's very important. Or contact me directly. That's fine, via Twitter or something like that. Mastodon, whatever you like. Ask questions. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.